Hello there guys, welcome to Mad Doc Minis, continuing my big battle board build of the Frigate Warspite for Warhammer 40,000, inspired by the real-life prestigious warship HMS Warspite. So, Gantry Cranes is what we're talking about here. I need a big crane that's going to transfer the heavy, enormous ordnance from my ammunition train onto a vehicle that's going to load the big guns on the side of my ship, my frigate. So here I'm building a double height track support using the same Tomy components as I used in the last video. They stick together much like Lego, but they stick together really well. So well that I don't need to use any glue or adhesive, and also gives me the option of breaking them apart and having like a single height gantry crane if I want it. So that's a nice added modular feature, if you will. But a double height one goes well across the track when it's supported on a single track support there. And the gantry is going to be made out of this old Playmobil fire engine ladder, which has been hanging around in my bits box for ages and ages and ages, and it's the right length and it's got the right look to it. So I just need to tidy that up a bit and clip it down underneath, just take some of the plastic off, which has gotten quite brittle over the years, but it holds together well enough. And after much kind of chopping and tidying and filing, I then attach it across the two raised track supports here, and there's just enough room there to clear the wagon, so there's enough height so a shell can be lifted off of the train and then down onto the loading vehicle, which is the whole point of this. Now, it's not that I really want to play with it. Well, okay, I do want to play with it a little bit, but you know what I mean. It's not supposed to be a toy, but I do want it to be posable. So it's kind of, for that reason, got to be a working crane. Now, this is not something you have to do. You could make a static model much easier than what I'm going to do in this video. But I did want it to be posable because I wanted to allow for some role-playing possibilities. So if the crane rather needs to change position, if someone's working it and all the rest of it, I just wanted that possibility. So it needs to be sturdy enough to allow it to be moved, but it doesn't need to be like robust like a toy. So that's kind of what hopefully I'm going to end up with here. So I just hot glue that kind of ladder across there, and that's starting to look nice. It's starting to look like what it's supposed to be, making sure the vehicle will fit underneath. Then I'm chopping up a bit of granny grating to provide a smooth surface for which the crane component can slide on. Find this little bit of ruminate, and that is exactly the right width to slide in between those ladder pieces there. So that's nice. So that's going to be the basis of the kind of winch mechanism that's going to slide back and forth. And I need to kind of build that up a little bit then. So I use some ruminate components, some components from the old Multi-Mac toy line. I don't know if any of you guys know about that. These are considered vintage toys now, and here I am hacking them up, but there you go. Strange old world. And then I put some modelling chain down through some holes in the ruminate, and that's going to be the lifting mechanism, if you will. Another bit of ruminate is going to support the lifting claw, so I kind of try and line that up nicely in order to kind of get that glued on. In truth, this is heavily edited. This was a horrible process because you need to line it up exactly if you want it to work. If you're making a static model, it's not so important, but if you want it to work, the chain in particular needs to be lined up really well. So yeah, lots of fiddling and farting and faffing around with this, but eventually I kind of hot glue that onto the bit of ruminate, and that supports it nicely. Then I consider making a nice winch system out of these kind of like material clothing poppers. I find a bit of plastic pipe that slots really well over the kind of raised knobble on those, and file that down and tidy it up, and find another bit of pipe that will fit exactly over that bit of pipe. And this is the important bit because it needs to be able to rotate. So it's a very simple way of making a rotating axle, because that outer pipe can then be glued onto a static object, in which cases these are once again components from Multi-Mac toys, and I just kind of cut those down a little bit so the pipe will sit well on top of them and hot glue the whole thing down. I then super glue the granny grating down onto the ladder because I'm satisfied that that's going to work and everything. It provides a nice smooth surface for the thing to slide on, cut it to the right size, and that gets glued down nicely. So job done there. Then it gets complicated because I have to kind of fix the chains onto the winch, and it just is really fiddly and faffy if you want it to work properly. Again, I consider carefully if you really do need a working moving crane. I wanted to persevere with it, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Here I'm using a magnet, attaching that onto what will be the lifting claw, and I put a magnet down inside the bottle that's going to be the shell for this build. I hot glued that inside the bottle so that the thing will be able to be detached nice and easily. I then build the claw mechanism around the shell once that's on there with the magnet, using Lego components, these curved Lego components, just to kind of add a bit of detail, and it gives the impression of a nice kind of magnetic lifting claw or something. I don't know, just looks a bit nicer. Just make sure that all fits, glue it all together with a bit of super glue, and job done there. And then it's a case of trying to fit the thing back on, and hey presto, it kind of works, which is good. I'm just doing a little bit of a check in a minute to make sure everything's running smoothly, and that the chain doesn't catch, or it's not kind of unequal or anything like that. So I just kind of do a little bit of a test run here and wind it up. I am going to need a locking mechanism for this, which I'll do a bit later on in the video, and I'll need some sort of handle on the side also, which I'll put on as well. This is just a bit of a dry run, if you will. You may also notice that I've primed various components off screen, and that's because it's just easy to do that in phases. So I haven't filmed that, but you gathered that's what I did. It's working, it's looking good. So moving on to the next phase, I'm just building some access ladders over the top of the winch system, because I want the gantry and that area to be a playable area. So I want miniatures to be able to walk along there, move along there, and get over the top. So some simple Lego ladders, a little bit of granny grating on some UPVC. I'm actually making a rotating handle here out of a Lego wheel. See, Lego is so good in so many ways. It provides all these little solutions for you. I just really love it. I use far too much of it probably in my builds, but there you go. It's a great solution for this problem. So I'm just kind of super gluing the axle in there, and then I'll attach the wheel on, so I've got a proper rotating handle, which is nice. Okay guys, so we've got the kind of completed model here. Obviously a lot more painting, detail work to do and things like that, but it's, you know, been mostly primed, and it just gives you an idea of what it's going to look like when it's all done. Yeah, everything's tightened up a little bit because I've given it a dust over with primer. Even the chain actually, which I was a bit torn on doing, but that seems to have worked out okay. It stiffened the chain slightly, but primer is really, really thin, and it just kind of dulls it down sufficiently so it's not like bright kind of goldy, brassy kind of colour. So we got our locking mechanism here, which is just a little bit of steel wire, and I put a little bit of tubing there, and there's actually some holes in the side of the kind of clothing popper things that I use, and I use those to my advantage and just thread it through into there, and that allows me to lock it simply at various different levels. So if I kind of go down a little bit, I can do it, you know, a lower level, just finding a bit to thread through there. Okay, it's not a very, you know, a good solution to it, but it's a workable solution to it, and it was quite easy to do, which is good. So that's my locking mechanism. I've got a little magnet that I just kind of store that little bit of wire on, just so it doesn't get lost in there. And as you've seen in the other footage, handle is a rotating Lego wheel, so that's nice. Okay, the shell has been magnetized inside. There's a magnet up in the claw there, so that will, if we get it into the right place, he says. Yeah, this is embarrassing. Yeah, so that will hold it. It took me a bit longer than I would have liked to have done that, to be honest with you, but it will hold in there, and it will detach quite easily. I'll probably put a little paint marker on there just so I know which side is up, if you know what I mean. But that would attach nicely if I want to get some simulation on loading a shell. So we bring it down there, we hold the shell, and then that would attach away quite easily. The magnet doesn't make complete contact, so there's one inside of the shell, one kind of up in here, and there's a very small gap between the magnets, so you can release them easily. I'll just kind of lock this back up again for now. It still moves back and forward reasonably well. Okay, it's tightened up a little bit with some primer, and I do want to get a dusting of lead belcher on this. I'm going to have to be careful with how much this tightens up, but a little bit of friction is fine on these things. As I say, it's not a toy as much as it is a model that's just posable, so I'm happy with that. So if you've been following along, you'll know that my plan was to have this vehicle, which is a vehicle that I made out of a toy telehandler, and you know, just kind of modified the end of that there to kind of hold the shell, and that kind of will load in to the cannons. It's got like a pretend, this bit I didn't make work because I mean, you've got to draw the line somewhere, but this is a pretend piston mechanism here which would push the shell out and into the breech of the big gun. So I'm kind of happy with that. Yeah, there's enough room to clear the wagons. It all works. It's properly scaled, and it all actually is capable of working. How much I'll actually play around with this in practice is debatable, but it's nice. It was a nice kind of problem solving exercise. So no, I hope you enjoyed that. It's actually like a nice looking piece of industrial terrain. I've got to dirty it all up a little bit and paint it a bit more over the primer, of course, but I'm really happy with how that turned out. And yeah, please keep watching, guys. Keep following me along, and we'll get more and more of this terrain done for the big battle board. So lots more ideas, lots more to come. Some stuff I'm convinced you'll find interesting in the next one. Actually, there's some exciting bits coming up. So top drawer. Thanks for joining me. Consider liking the video if you've enjoyed the content, and a share is always appreciated because it helps the channel to grow and to expand. And if you're not already subscribed, consider giving me a sub. So I will catch you in a future video. Cheers, guys.